forced to marry a fat duke at 18. On the wedding night, he showed why she was his choice. The winds carried whispers of snow, rustling the bare branches that lined the high stone walls of Castle Ravencourt. Inside the grand halls, tension wove itself into the air, thick and heavy. Today, the young Lady Seraphine would step into a life she had never chosen. Seraphine, at 18, was known across Erendor for her beauty and intelligence. Her hair was the color of autumn chestnuts, and her eyes, green like forest leaves, held a sharpness that few dared to meet. She had grown up learning the ways of diplomacy, the subtle art of reading people, and the weight of her family's ambitions. Yet, nothing in all those lessons could prepare her for what awaited her now: marriage to Duke Alaric. Alaric's reputation preceded him. Stories told of his immense size and unusual appearance. Some whispered that he was a recluse, hiding away in his castle filled with dark magic. Others spoke of curses and strange powers that surrounded him like shadows. Many noble families had sought to avoid him, fearing scandal or danger, and yet he had chosen her. Or rather, her family had been forced to accept the king's decree. Seraphine would be his bride. The ride to Ravencourt was long and silent. Seraphine sat upright in her carriage, her hands folded neatly on her lap, her thoughts swirling. Every mile closer to the castle felt like a mile deeper into uncertainty. Her attendants whispered of Alaric's wealth, his power, and the mysterious lands he ruled. But Seraphine only felt a cold knot of fear and resentment tighten in her chest. As the carriage rolled through the towering gates of the castle, the enormity of her new life became visible. The castle was vast, almost alive, with its stone towers stretching like fingers toward the sky. Dark ivy crawled along its walls, and strange gargoyles perched on ledges, staring with stone eyes that seemed almost too lifelike. The drawbridge lowered, and the heavy wooden doors swung open as though the castle itself had been expecting her. Alaric awaited her in the main hall. He was seated upon a chair that seemed carved from dark wood, surrounded by glowing candelabras. His presence was immense. He was not merely large in body. He carried an aura of authority, calm, and unspoken power. Seraphine's heart raced. She had expected someone cold, cruel, or grotesque, yet there was an intelligence in his gaze, a quiet command that drew her in despite herself. "Lady Seraphine," he said, his voice deep and smooth, "welcome to Ravencourt." There was no warmth in the greeting, yet it was far from unkind. It was deliberate, measured, and aware of the weight of the moment. Seraphine curtsied, feeling awkward under the scrutiny of his penetrating eyes. "Duke Alaric," she replied softly, her voice steadier than she felt. "I thank you for receiving me." Alaric rose slowly, each movement deliberate. His frame filled the space with presence, yet he did not approach her too closely. There was a restraint in him that spoke of self-discipline, or perhaps self-consciousness. "You honor Ravencourt by your presence," he said. "I hope the halls of this castle will not seem too cold tonight." The words were polite, almost formal, yet there was something behind them, a hidden depth, a sense that he understood her unease. Seraphine felt a flicker of curiosity. For a moment, she allowed herself to wonder if the rumors she had heard were exaggerated, if perhaps the man before her was more than the sum of whispered stories. Dinner was held in a grand hall adorned with tapestries depicting ancient battles and the lineage of the Dukes of Ravencourt. The table was heavy with silver, crystal goblets, and dishes she had never imagined tasting. Yet Seraphine's appetite was absent, replaced by the strange tension of being in the presence of a man whose mind she did not yet understand. Alaric spoke little, asking questions about her home, her family, and her studies. His inquiries were precise, thoughtful, and never shallow. He listened as if absorbing every detail, yet he revealed little of himself. Seraphine found herself both frustrated and intrigued. Each answer she gave seemed to unlock only more questions. Who was this man behind the rumors, and why had he chosen her? After dinner, Seraphine was led to her chambers, a room of dark woods and soft fabrics, candlelight flickering against the walls. She paused at the doorway, hesitant to step into the space that would now be hers. Her fingers brushed the handle, and she felt a chill as though the castle itself was observing her. Alaric entered shortly after, his presence filling the room again. He did not sit, nor did he approach too closely. Instead, he leaned against the doorway, studying her with an intensity that made her stomach twist. "You may find Ravencourt strange," he said quietly. "It is not a place for comfort, but for those who seek understanding beyond appearances." Seraphine frowned, unsure how to respond. "And what do you seek, Duke Alaric?" she asked, her voice steadier than she expected. A shadow crossed his face. He stepped closer, slowly, deliberately, closing some of the distance between them. "I seek someone who sees me," he said. "Not the stories, not the whispers, not the shapes cast by fear or imagination. Someone who sees the truth beneath." The words struck her, unsteadying her. She had not expected sincerity, not from a man of his reputation. Her chest tightened as she realized he was speaking to her alone. She began, unsure what to say. Her heart seemed to beat too fast for her own calm. He smiled faintly, almost sadly. "You are my choice," he said. "Not for what you can give, nor what you can offer, but because I believe you will understand me. And understanding is rarer than loyalty in these lands." For a long moment, Seraphine could not speak. She felt the room shrink around her, the shadows growing deeper, the candlelight flickering like a heartbeat. She wanted to run, to escape, yet something rooted her in place. The man before her, so vast in body and yet even greater in presence, was not what she had expected. And for reasons she did not yet understand, she felt a spark of curiosity, of hope, igniting within her. Night deepened around the castle. The wind howled softly, rattling windows and stirring the ancient ivy that clung to the stone walls. In her chamber, Seraphine sat by the window, staring at the moonlight that washed over the frozen gardens. Her mind replayed Alaric's words, the depth in his gaze, the calm confidence that masked a hidden pain. She thought of her life up to this moment, of the obligations forced upon her, of the fear and anger that had ridden with her like a shadow. And yet, she also felt something new, an unexpected sense that perhaps, just perhaps, her story with Alaric was not entirely one of misery. Perhaps beneath the weight of duty and rumor, there was room for understanding and even connection. Footsteps echoed softly in the corridor. She looked up to see Alaric pause in the doorway again, silent, watching. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect, then turned and left without a word. Seraphine felt a strange longing, a desire to know more about this man who had, in a few hours, unsettled her so completely. She sank back into the window seat, the moonlight illuminating her face. Questions and doubts swirled within her, but a single truth remained clear. The Duke was not what she had expected, and the choice he had made her, of all people, was not a gesture of duty. It was something far more complicated, far more powerful. Outside, the castle loomed like a silent sentinel, its towers dark against the starlit sky. Within its walls, a young woman and a man bound by duty and mystery began the first fragile steps of a journey neither could yet understand. Tonight had been only the beginning. And in the quiet, Seraphine felt it, the faint stirrings of something that might one day grow into trust, loyalty, or perhaps even something deeper. But for now, there were only questions, shadows, and the unspoken promise that the night had set in motion a story far greater than either of them could foresee. The castle was alive, the wind sang through the battlements, and Seraphine understood one undeniable truth. She had entered a world where appearances deceived, where power hid in unexpected places, and where a single choice could change everything. And Duke Alaric, he was a mystery she could not yet unravel. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Castle Ravencourt, painting the stone floors in soft gold. Lady Seraphine awoke to a silence that was almost alive, the kind that carried secrets in its folds. She dressed quietly, her fingers brushing over the delicate fabrics of her gown, and wondered what the day would bring. She had survived her first night in the castle, yet the uneasy curiosity stirred within her still refused to settle. The castle was vast, its corridors long and winding, often turning back upon themselves as though to confuse outsiders. Servants bustled through the halls, carrying trays of food and messages, but they spoke little to her, as if uncertain how to treat the Duke's young bride. Even the air seemed to carry a weight, a strange, still magic that made her senses sharper and her mind restless. Alaric appeared in the hallway as she descended the grand staircase. His presence, as always, seemed to fill the space around him. Today, however, there was a purpose in his stride, a quiet urgency that Seraphine could not ignore. He was dressed in deep green robes that shimmered faintly in the morning light, and his eyes, dark and piercing, held a gravity that made her pulse quicken. "Good morning, Lady Seraphine," he said, his voice softer than the night before. There was no formal bow, no distant politeness, just a directness that felt almost intimate. "I trust your rest was sufficient." Seraphine nodded, trying to steady her voice. "Yes, thank you, Duke Alaric. The room is very comfortable." He inclined his head slightly. "I hope it will continue to be, though comfort here is not always what one expects." There was a hint of amusement in his tone, yet it carried a shadow of seriousness she could not ignore. Breakfast was a quiet affair, served in a small dining chamber where the walls were lined with shelves of books and odd artifacts. Seraphine noticed the faint glow of enchanted items, small objects that seemed to hum with energy, and she realized that the rumors about Alaric's knowledge of magic were true. "You have an unusual collection," she remarked, curiosity breaking the early stiffness of her voice. Alaric studied her, one eyebrow slightly raised. "Knowledge and protection often take forms that the ordinary eye cannot perceive. These objects are safeguards. Not all dangers come from men." His gaze softened for a brief moment. "Some come from forces far older than our kingdom." Seraphine felt a shiver run down her spine. She had grown up with stories of ancient curses, spirits, and old magics, but to hear it from him, so matter-of-factly, made it real. She wondered what lay beneath his calm exterior, what storms he had weathered in solitude. After breakfast, Alaric guided her through the castle. They walked slowly, past high towers and shadowed halls, each corner revealing secrets of the estate. Paintings of ancestors with stern faces and mysterious smiles lined the walls. Tapestries told stories of battles and victories, while strange symbols carved into the stones hinted at protective spells. "Your castle is alive," Seraphine whispered, feeling both awe and unease. "It feels like it watches us." Alaric's lips curved in a faint, unreadable smile. "It does, in a way. Those who have lived here have left echoes. Some echoes are peaceful, others are not." He glanced at her, and for a moment she saw the weight of experience behind his eyes. "You must learn to listen carefully, Seraphine. The walls tell more than the words of men ever could." As they entered the library, Seraphine's attention was immediately drawn to the countless books and scrolls. Some were ordinary, bound in leather and gold leaf. Others were dark, with symbols she did not recognize, radiating a subtle power that made the hairs on her arms stand. "May I?" she asked, reaching for a heavy tome resting on a pedestal. "Of course," Alaric replied, his gaze steady. He did not attempt to stop her, but she sensed a quiet warning in the calmness of his posture. Knowledge can be as dangerous as it is enlightening. Seraphine opened the book carefully. The pages were filled with stories of kingdoms long forgotten, of curses and blessings intertwined, of men and women who wielded magic and power in ways she had only dreamed of. As she read, she realized that the Duke's reputation was not built on fear alone. He had seen and survived things that would break ordinary men, and his choices, though hidden, were often wise and measured. "You read quickly," Alaric observed, breaking the silence. She looked up, startled. I suppose I have always loved books." He nodded as if approving, then added, "Books reveal the truth that men often hide. They do not judge and they do not lie unless we teach them to." There was a pause, a silence that carried more weight than words. Seraphine felt the pull of curiosity, mingled with caution. She realized that Alaric, despite his size and rumors, was not merely a man to be feared. He was a man to be understood, a rare, complicated soul in a world that often demanded simplicity. Their exploration continued into the castle gardens, where frost clung to every leaf and branch, turning the space into a silver wonderland. Statues of forgotten heroes and spirits stood silently among the hedges. Alaric moved among them with ease, as if he knew each one's story, and Seraphine followed, fascinated. "Why do you care for these things?" she asked. "Why keep the statues, the books, the objects of magic?" Alaric paused, looking out over the frozen fountains that glimmered like glass. "Because memory is powerful and understanding is survival. These things remind me, and those who may follow, of who we are and of what is worth protecting. Some truths are too easily lost if we do not guard them." As they walked, Seraphine began to notice small details. The way his eyes softened when he spoke of the past, the careful way he moved through the garden as if honoring invisible boundaries, and the quiet restraint that marked every gesture. He was a man shaped by experience, by solitude, by responsibility, and by forces she could only begin to comprehend. Yet not all was calm. Rumors had reached the castle from neighboring lands, and the threat of political scheming was never far. That evening, a messenger arrived with a letter sealed in black wax. Alaric broke the seal with steady fingers, reading it aloud in a voice low and controlled. The words revealed a challenge. A rival lord sought to exploit Seraphine's youth and inexperience, aiming to create discord between the duke and the kingdom. Seraphine felt a tremor of fear. She had known of political maneuvering in theory, but to see it arrive so openly, so dangerously, made it real. She glanced at Alaric, expecting anger or fury, yet found instead a calm readiness, an intelligence quietly assessing every possibility. "This is not merely a threat," he said after a pause, tucking the letter into his robes. "It is a test. They believe they can use you to weaken me. They are wrong." He did not raise his voice. He did not act rashly, and in that calm Seraphine felt something unexpected: safety. He might be feared by many, but beside him, she felt that the danger could be met with wisdom, not panic. That night, as the castle settled into quiet once more, Seraphine returned to the library. She could not sleep, her mind alive with thoughts of Alaric, the secrets of Ravencourt, and the unseen powers that seemed to linger in the walls. She ran her fingers along the spines of the books, imagining the stories they held, imagining the life she might live here if she could understand the man beside her. Alaric entered the room silently, his presence calm but overwhelming. "You think too much," he said softly, a faint smile on his lips. "But perhaps that is necessary. Those who understand the world are seldom idle." Seraphine met his gaze. "And those who guard it?" she asked. He stepped closer, the shadows of the room wrapping around him. "Those who guard it often bear a loneliness that is heavier than any sword or shield," he replied. "But occasionally a light appears, even in the darkest places. You may be such a light." Her heart skipped. The words were careful, yet full of meaning. She did not know if she could meet them fully, yet she felt the weight of them settle over her, a mixture of hope and fear. Alaric's eyes did not demand a response. They simply invited understanding and perhaps something more. As she left the library, Seraphine realized that she no longer viewed the Duke as merely a stranger or a man she was forced to marry. She had begun to see him as a person, complex, secretive, and undeniably powerful. And with that understanding came a new fear, the fear of wanting to know him too much, of being drawn into his world where shadows and secrets walked as freely as people. That night, as the wind howled through the towers and frost glittered against the windows, Seraphine sat alone by the fire. She thought of the Duke, of the strange mix of warmth and distance in his presence, and of the challenges that lay ahead. The castle, the rumors, the unseen dangers, all of it felt like a living thing, pressing around her, and she realized that her journey with Alaric had only just begun. And somewhere in the depths of Ravencourt, Alaric watched the flames flicker, thinking of the young woman who had entered his life not with fear, but with curiosity and courage. He knew the path ahead would test them both, in ways neither could yet imagine. But for the first time in many years, he felt the faint stirrings of something he had long thought impossible: trust. Outside, the wind swept through the battlements, carrying with it whispers of old magic and unseen eyes. Within, two hearts, bound by duty and mystery, began to feel the first faint threads of connection, threads that could either bind them together or unravel them entirely. And as the castle slept under the watchful moon, the first real test of their unity approached, silent and inevitable, promising trials, secrets, and the possibility of something neither had dared to hope for. The morning mist clung to the high towers of Castle Ravencourt like a silvery veil, hiding the grounds in a quiet haze. Lady Seraphine stood at the window of her chamber, watching the frost-covered gardens glimmer in the pale light. The events of the previous days played over and over in her mind. She had seen the Duke's power, his control over the castle, and the way his presence seemed to command both respect and fear. Yet beneath that, she had glimpsed something else: loneliness, intelligence, and an unusual depth of emotion. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. "Enter," she said, turning to see Duke Alaric step inside. He moved with deliberate care, as if even the air around him had rules. There was no ceremony, no cold politeness, just him, present and quietly commanding. "Good morning," he said, his voice low and calm. "I trust you slept well." Seraphine nodded, though the truth was complicated. Sleep had come in fits, disturbed by shadows and whispers of things she could not yet name. I rested," she replied. Alaric approached the window and looked out at the gardens. "The morning brings clarity," he said, "and sometimes danger. Today may bring both." Seraphine frowned. "Danger? From whom?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he handed her a folded parchment sealed in black wax. "Read this," he said, "and do not let fear guide your actions." With trembling fingers, she opened the letter. The words revealed that a neighboring lord had sent spies into the castle grounds, seeking to exploit her youth and inexperience to weaken Alaric's position. Seraphine's heart raced, and she looked up at him. "They intend to use me as a pawn," she whispered. Alaric's expression was unreadable, yet his eyes held an intensity that made her shiver. "They underestimate both of us," he said quietly. "I have protected this castle, these lands, and those within it for many years. You will not be a pawn, Seraphine. If you stand with me, you will stand as my equal." The words struck her, and a faint warmth spread in her chest. She realized he did not speak merely to reassure her. He expected her to act, to think, and to make decisions. She was not simply a bride or a figurehead. She was part of a plan, part of a defense, part of something far greater than she had imagined. The day passed in cautious preparation. Seraphine and Alaric moved through the castle together, inspecting gates, checking corridors, and ensuring that the servants understood their roles. With every step, Seraphine felt the pull of his presence. She noticed the careful way he observed her reactions, the subtle encouragement in his voice, and the respect he showed for her opinions. It was intoxicating and unsettling in equal measure. By late afternoon, the first signs of the spies' intrusion appeared. Shadows flickered along the walls of the outer courtyard, and faint sounds of movement betrayed their presence. Alaric's reaction was swift but measured. He gathered Seraphine and led her to a hidden chamber within the castle, one she had never seen before. "This room is protected," he explained. "It is shielded from eyes and ears that would seek to harm us. Here you will be safe, and here we can plan our response." Seraphine looked around the chamber, noticing runes carved into the walls and strange symbols etched into the floors. The air hummed with power, subtle but undeniable. She felt a thrill of awe. You built this?" she asked. Alaric shook his head slightly. "No. I inherited it, but I learned to command it. These protections are not mere stone and mortar, they are alive in their own way, and they will serve us today." They spent hours strategizing, moving pieces across maps, considering every possible angle. Seraphine's mind, once hesitant and unsure, now worked quickly, anticipating threats and offering solutions. Alaric observed her, impressed by her intelligence and courage, and for the first time he allowed himself to show a faint flicker of admiration. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the castle fell into a tense silence. Footsteps echoed in the corridors above, faint but purposeful. The spies were near. Alaric and Seraphine moved to the chamber window, watching as figures crept along the outer walls. "They do not know the castle as we do," Alaric whispered. "That is their mistake." Seraphine felt her heart pounding, yet she did not look away. For the first time, she understood the weight of responsibility that Alaric bore every day. And for the first time, she realized that she was not merely a guest or an observer. She was part of the defense, part of the living heart of Ravencourt. The confrontation came suddenly. The spies attempted to scale the walls, unaware of the hidden guardians that awaited them. Alaric moved with surprising swiftness, his power manifesting in subtle ways that Seraphine had never seen before. Shadows seemed to bend at his command, barriers rose where none had been, and the intruders found themselves trapped, unable to move or see. Seraphine watched in awe as Alaric controlled the situation. His strength was undeniable, yet it was tempered with precision and care. He did not strike recklessly. He used his abilities to neutralize the threat without unnecessary harm. And through it all, he remained calm, his eyes occasionally meeting hers with a silent assurance that she was safe. When the danger had passed, silence returned to the castle. The shadows retreated, leaving only the faint glow of candlelight and the lingering hum of protective magic. Seraphine turned to Alaric, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and admiration. You saved me," she whispered. He looked at her, his gaze steady. "No," he said softly. "We saved each other. You were brave today, Seraphine. You thought, you acted, and you trusted. That is why you are not a pawn." Her chest tightened and she felt a warmth spread through her. For the first time, she saw him not only as a powerful man, but as someone who trusted her, someone who valued her presence and her mind. The walls she had built around herself began to crumble, replaced by a tentative trust she had not expected to feel. That night the castle was quiet, yet the events of the day lingered in the air like an unspoken bond. Seraphine returned to her chamber, but sleep would not come easily. She thought of Alaric, of the way he had moved with strength and control, and of the subtle kindness he had shown her amidst danger. Her heart ached with a mixture of fear, admiration, and a growing curiosity she could not ignore. Alaric appeared at her door once more, silent and deliberate as ever. "You are restless," he observed, stepping inside without waiting for invitation. "The mind does not rest when it has faced truth for the first time." Seraphine looked up, startled by his presence but not afraid. I cannot stop thinking," she admitted. "About today, about you, about this castle." He nodded slowly. "And that is natural. The first confrontation opens the eyes to many things: strength, danger, and trust. You must learn to balance them all." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you trust me?" Alaric's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability showing through his composed exterior. "I do," he said quietly, "more than I have trusted anyone in many years. And that is why I must warn you, trust is powerful, but it is also fragile. It can be tested and it can be betrayed. You must decide how much you are willing to give." The words struck her deeply. She realized that trust was not given lightly in this castle, not to outsiders, not even to those who seemed close. And yet, she felt an urge to meet it, to rise to the challenge, to step into a partnership that was far more profound than she had imagined. The night deepened, and the firelight flickered across the walls. Seraphine and Alaric sat in quiet proximity, the weight of unspoken words and emotions heavy in the room. For the first time, there was no need for formalities, no need for distance. They shared a silence filled with understanding, tension, and the beginnings of a bond neither had anticipated. Outside, the wind whispered through the castle, carrying the distant hum of old magic and unseen eyes. Within, two souls, bound by duty, circumstance, and now trust, began to navigate a delicate intimacy, one that promised trials, revelations, and the first stirrings of a connection neither had dared to name. And as the castle slept under the moonlit sky, the first real test of their hearts approached, silent, inevitable, and filled with the promise of danger, trust, and the possibility of something neither could yet fully comprehend. The first light of dawn broke across Castle Raven Court, painting the frozen gardens in hues of pale gold and silver. Lady Seraphine stood at the highest tower, her hair catching the soft wind, her breath misting in the cold air. The castle, which had once seemed oppressive and distant, now felt alive, watching, listening, waiting. And in the quiet of the morning, she felt a sense of determination she had never known before. The events of the past days had changed everything. She had seen the Duke's power, his wisdom, and his restraint. She had seen the danger that stalked the walls of the castle, the subtle threats of men who underestimated them both. And she had begun to understand Alaric, not as a distant, imposing figure, but as a man who carried the weight of his family, his people, and secrets too old for ordinary minds to grasp. Alaric joined her at the tower, his footsteps silent on the stone floor. He did not speak at first, simply standing beside her, watching the pale light spread across the grounds. His presence, once overwhelming, now felt like a shield, steady and protective. "The castle seems different in the light," Seraphine said softly, turning to him. "I can see things I could not before, and I can understand more." Alaric nodded, his dark eyes calm. "Light reveals much, but some truths are found only in shadow. You have seen both, Seraphine, and you have acted with courage, intelligence, and loyalty. That is why you are not only my ally, you are my equal." Her heart warmed at the words. For the first time, she did not feel like a pawn, a bride forced into duty. She felt like a partner, a companion, someone who mattered in the decisions and the destiny of the castle. But peace was fragile. The curse that had shadowed Alaric's family for generations still lingered. It was a subtle, draining magic, tied to the Duke's very life, strengthened by neglect, weakened by love and trust. The events of recent days had stirred it, and Seraphine could sense the tension that hummed beneath the walls of Ravencourt. "You have carried this burden alone for so long," she said, her voice quiet but determined. "You do not have to do it anymore. Let me help." Alaric's expression softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through his composed exterior. "You have no idea what you offer," he admitted. "The curse is ancient, bound to blood, to choices made long before I was born. To confront it requires more than courage. It requires understanding, sacrifice, and a bond strong enough to withstand the darkness." Seraphine stepped closer, her hand brushing lightly against his. "Then we will face it together," she said. "I will not let you bear it alone any longer." For a moment he said nothing, and she felt the weight of his gaze, steady and searching. Then slowly he took her hand in both of his. The warmth of his touch was unexpected, a gentle reassurance that contrasted with the formidable presence he carried in the world. "Together," he echoed, and for the first time, Seraphine felt that she truly believed it. The first step of their plan was to confront the source of the curse, an ancient chamber deep beneath the castle, long hidden from view. They moved in silence through secret passages, the air thick with magic and history. The walls were lined with runes that pulsed faintly, and shadows seemed to move with purpose along the corridors. "This place is alive," Seraphine whispered, her hand tightening around Alaric's. "Yes," he replied. "It reacts to intention, to fear, to hope. And it recognizes the bond between those who enter together." As they descended deeper, the energy of the chamber grew stronger, almost overwhelming. Seraphine could feel it in her chest, a pressure that pressed against her heart, testing her resolve. Alaric guided her to the center of the room, where a stone pedestal rose from the floor. Upon it lay an ancient artifact, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to writhe in the candlelight. "This is the heart of the curse," Alaric said. "And to break it, we must combine our strength, our trust, and our willingness to face what lies within us." Seraphine nodded, though her hands shook slightly. "I am ready," she said. Alaric reached for her hands, placing them gently over the artifact. At first nothing happened, then a faint glow emerged, spreading across the runes like liquid light. The air trembled, and a low hum filled the chamber. Shadows shifted along the walls, forming vague shapes that seemed almost alive. The curse was testing them, probing for weakness. Seraphine felt a chill, visions of despair, isolation, and fear pressing against her mind. But Alaric's presence steadied her. He whispered her name, guiding her, reminding her to trust, to focus on their bond rather than the shadows. Together, they pushed forward, merging their intention and courage. The glow grew stronger, enveloping the room until the oppressive weight of the curse began to lift. The shadows recoiled, retreating into corners, unable to withstand the combined strength of their resolve. Finally, with a pulse of light, the artifact dimmed and the chamber fell silent. Seraphine and Alaric looked at each other, breathless, hearts racing. The weight of centuries seemed to lift from the room, leaving only calm and clarity. "It is done," Alaric said softly. "The curse is broken." Seraphine felt a surge of relief, a joy that was deeper than anything she had imagined. "We did it," she whispered, the words trembling on her lips. "Together." Alaric smiled, a genuine, rare smile that illuminated his face. "Together," he echoed, and for the first time he allowed himself to step closer, to let the vulnerability show. The return to the castle above was quiet, the halls no longer oppressive but warm with the sense of triumph. Servants moved with less caution, as if the castle itself had breathed a sigh of relief. The air seemed lighter, freer, carrying a faint hum of magic that was no longer threatening but protective. That night, they stood together in the highest tower, looking out over the lands of Ravencourt. The moon was full, bathing the frost-covered gardens in silver light. The silence between them was not uncomfortable but intimate, filled with the shared knowledge of what they had endured. "You have changed this place," Seraphine said softly, "and you have changed me." Alaric turned to her, his eyes steady and warm. "No," he said. "You have changed me. You reminded me that even in darkness, trust and courage can create light. You reminded me that I am not alone." Her heart swelled, and she stepped closer, brushing a hand against his chest. The warmth of him was unexpected, grounding, comforting. She realized then that the bond they had forged was deeper than duty, deeper than fear. It was built on understanding, respect, and the shared courage to face shadows together. "Alaric," she whispered, I care for you. Not because of duty, not because of expectation, but because of who you are." His gaze softened, a faint shadow of vulnerability crossing his face. "And I care for you, Seraphine. You are the light I did not know I needed, the strength I had not dared to seek. You are my choice, now and always." For the first time, they allowed themselves to embrace fully, not as duke and bride, not as protector and charge, but as equals, as companions, as two souls who had survived darkness together. The walls of the tower, the castle, and even the weight of history seemed to fall away, leaving only the warmth of connection, trust, and the quiet certainty that they belonged together. Outside, the wind whispered through the battlements, carrying with it the faint echoes of old magic, now transformed into protection rather than threat. The castle, which had once seemed a prison, now felt like a home, a place of safety, understanding, and possibility. In the days that followed, Ravencourt began to heal. The lands were safer, the servants more at ease, and the atmosphere of suspicion that had haunted the halls lifted. Seraphine and Alaric moved through their duties side by side, their bond growing stronger with each shared responsibility, each quiet conversation, and each moment of trust. And though the future was still uncertain, they faced it together. Whatever dangers might come, whether from men, magic, or fate, they would meet them as one, strengthened by their shared courage and their understanding of each other. In the quiet of the castle, on a night lit by moon and stars, Seraphine realized something she had not expected. Love, true love, was not about ease or comfort. It was about trust, sacrifice, understanding, and the courage to face darkness together. And in Alaric she had found all of those things, and more. He was no longer merely a duke, no longer merely a man bound by rumor and expectation. He was her partner, her equal, and her home. And in that knowledge, Seraphine felt a peace she had never known, a strength that carried her beyond fear and doubt, into a life of possibility, hope, and shared destiny. Together they stood at the edge of the tower, looking out over a kingdom reborn, a castle alive with protection, and a future waiting to be written. And as the wind whispered through the stone walls, carrying the quiet hum of magic and the promise of new beginnings, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it united, transformed, and unbroken. The shadows had lifted. The curse was gone. And two hearts, once uncertain and divided by fear and expectation, now beat together in trust, courage, and a love forged in the quiet, dangerous, and magical world of Ravencourt.